It always starts the same way. A room full of voices, some loud, some nervous, some trying far too hard. People talking over each other, proving points, seeking approval, hiding insecurity behind opinions. And then, someone enters and says nothing. They don't interrupt, they don't argue, they don't even try to be noticed. But suddenly, they are. Eyes shift, tension builds, the room adjusts. Why? Because silence, when intentional, is more powerful than any argument. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this better than most. To him, true power wasn't about dominance or volume, it was about presence, inner control, clarity. Power, not as something you take from others, but as something you generate from within. We live in an age of noise. Everyone has something to say all the time. But what if real strength lies not in what you say, but in what you don't? This is where we begin. The world fears what it cannot read. There's a basic psychological truth. People are terrified of the unknown. They want predictability, they want clarity, and most of all, they want to understand the people around them. So what happens when someone doesn't give them that? They project, they guess, they interpret, and that's where your power begins. When you say nothing, people start to fill in the silence with their own insecurities, assumptions, and expectations. Your quiet becomes a mirror, and that mirror reflects them, not you. You've done nothing, and yet they're already disarmed. That's not manipulation, that's nature. You're simply letting the system collapse under its own need for certainty, while you remain unreadable, steady, and in control. The psychology of controlled silence. Modern psychology confirms what Nietzsche intuited long ago. Humans are wired to resolve tension. Silence creates tension. And when that silence comes from someone who appears calm, self-contained, and observant, the tension becomes unbearable. Your silence becomes heavy, not awkward, charged. In behavioral terms, this is a form of social asymmetry. You're not giving away what others are offering too freely: attention, opinion, validation. And that imbalance makes you the center of gravity in any interaction. People start leaning in, literally and emotionally. They want to know what you're thinking, what you're holding back, what you're planning. You've said nothing. And yet you control the narrative, power without performance. Here's the secret: you don't need to perform. Most people exhaust themselves trying to be charismatic. They joke, they interrupt, they over-explain. And in doing so, they expose everything: their need for approval, their fear of silence, their desperation to be liked. But you stay still, you listen, you measure, you wait, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you choose not to. That's what Nietzsche would call sovereignty, the ability to control yourself when others can't. To stay composed, not to impress, but because you have nothing to prove. That's real dominance, silent, effortless, inevitable. The eyes say what the mouth cannot. There's a reason eye contact is so powerful. It's ancient, primal. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to emotion. If you hold someone's gaze, not aggressively, not anxiously, but calmly, you're telling them something words never could. I see you, I am not afraid of you, and I do not need you. That message, it shakes people, especially those used to controlling the room. Nietzsche once wrote that if you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back. But in this case, you are the abyss. You reflect more than you reveal, and that makes people uncomfortable and intrigued. Begin with control over yourself. Before you can control any room, you must master the one person who's always there, you. If your silence is coming from fear, it will show. If it's coming from resentment, it will crack. But if it's coming from clarity, from calm, from intention, it becomes unshakable. Nietzsche believed that strength begins with overcoming oneself, not others. Yourself, your impulses, your ego, your need to be seen. When you can walk into a room without the need to impress, persuade, or even speak, you've already outsmarted everyone who still does. The power of seeing without being seen. Everyone wants to be heard, but very few want to listen, and fewer still know how to see. You've already learned that silence gives you power, but silence alone isn't enough. To truly outsmart people without saying a word, you must become a master of perception, a quiet observer of behavior, emotion, and motive. This isn't about mind reading, it's about attention. a kind of radical awareness that most people are too distracted, reactive, or self-absorbed to ever develop. In a world of talkers, the one who watches is the one in control. People expose themselves. You just have to notice. Here's a truth most never realize. People are constantly broadcasting who they are. Every movement, every hesitation, every fake smile and overcompensation is a signal. Most just don't notice. Why? Because they're too busy waiting for their turn to speak, too focused on being interesting instead of being interested. But if you can resist that urge, if you can sit back, eyes open, ego quiet, people will tell you everything without realizing it. Where do they look when they talk? Do their words match their tone? When do they pause? What makes them defensive? What makes them lean forward? What makes them uncomfortable? These are the cracks in the mask, and if you see them, you understand them. And if you understand them, you control the game. Observation is not passive, it's tactical. Most people think watching is a passive act. Nietzsche would disagree. To observe deeply is to penetrate the surface, to see not just what someone says, but why they say it, how they say it, and what they don't say. Silence makes others uncomfortable. Observation turns that discomfort into information. And the beauty is, you don't need to ask anything. They'll tell you who they are, just to fill the space you create by not speaking. It's what psychologists call the projective effect. We project ourselves onto neutral spaces. So when you're quiet, when you hold back, people start talking at you, even if you've said nothing. They try to impress you, or intimidate you, or win you over. But really, they're revealing themselves, and you're taking notes, silently. The mirror principle. Here's where it gets powerful. When you master observation, you become a mirror. People don't see you, they see themselves in you. And that's both unsettling and magnetic. It's why people often say things like, "I don't know why I'm telling you this," because your silence invites honesty, or projection, or confession. And once you become the mirror, something changes. You stop playing their game, and they start reacting to your stillness. That's when the power flips. Reading the room is a superpower. In every social setting, there's a current beneath the surface. Status, insecurity, attraction, competition. Most people just react to it, unaware. But you read it. You see who's pretending, who's dominating, who's deflecting, who's leading, and you don't interfere. You understand, quietly, precisely. When the time is right, you say one thing, or maybe nothing at all. But it hits deeper than 100 words, because it's anchored in truth, a truth you've earned by watching while others performed. Nietzsche might say, "He who sees deeply disturbs without effort," because the one who knows doesn't need to argue. He already wins, simply by understanding more than anyone else in the room. What makes this so unsettling? Here's the twist. People are most comfortable when they're being watched by those who are easy to read. But you're a paradox. You're watching them, but they can't read you back. That creates a power gap, a psychological asymmetry that causes tension, the kind that makes people adjust themselves, trip over their words, or second-guess their actions. All because you noticed something they didn't know they were showing, and that's the whole point. Your silence amplifies your awareness, and your awareness makes their performance fall apart. Conclusion: the quiet advantage. So remember this, you don't need to interrogate, you don't need to challenge, you just need to see with sharpness, calm, and intention. Because once you understand people better than they understand themselves, you don't need to outtalk them. You've already outmaneuvered them. Emotional invincibility, the calm that breaks others. Imagine someone trying to provoke you. They mock you, challenge you, try to get under your skin. They expect resistance, anger, defensiveness, reaction, but you don't give them any. You don't flinch. You don't explain. You don't even blink. Instead, you hold your ground, calm, collected, unmoved. And in that moment, everything shifts. Because while they were trying to shake you, you were anchoring yourself deeper. This isn't indifference, it's not arrogance. It's a form of psychological mastery. And Nietzsche would call it one of the highest expressions of personal power. Reacting is losing. Let's make one thing clear. The moment you react, you've given your power away. You've let someone else push your emotional buttons. You've let them decide your mood, your tone, your state. And no matter how clever your response is, it came from their stimulus, not your intention. True power doesn't react, it responds, if and only if necessary. Nietzsche believed that strength begins with self-conquest, and the first enemy you must defeat is your own ego, the part of you that wants to be right, to be heard, to strike back. But when you resist that pull, you enter rare territory. You become emotionally untouchable, not because you're cold, but because you're in full possession of yourself. The stillness that unnerves people. When you stay calm under pressure, something unsettling happens to the people around you. They become nervous, uncertain, unstable. Why? Because they can't control you. They don't know where you stand. They can't read your temperature. You've removed the emotional map they were using to navigate the interaction. This makes your presence magnetic and dangerous. It's not about being robotic, it's about having mastery over your state. While others are hijacked by their triggers, you remain still. And in that stillness is an enormous strength. The psychology of emotional control. In neuroscience, this is known as prefrontal override, the ability of the thinking brain to regulate the emotional brain. Most people lack it. Their emotions lead the way. But when you train it, you flip the script. You don't get dragged into petty debates. You don't mirror someone else's energy. You set the tone. You set the temperature. This is not suppression, it's regulation. It's the ability to pause between stimulus and response and to choose power over impulse. Because whoever controls their emotions controls the situation. Power through composure. Think of history's most powerful figures, generals, philosophers, statesmen. Their strength didn't come from shouting or swinging wildly. It came from their ability to stay focused while chaos erupted around them. That's emotional leadership. That's what Nietzsche respected. Not brute strength, but spiritual muscle. You become the eye of the storm. Others spin. You remain centered. You become the person others instinctively defer to, not because you demand it, but because your calm is louder than their chaos. What happens when you don't react? Something remarkable. The person trying to dominate you exposes themselves. Their aggression becomes desperation. Their sarcasm reveals insecurity. Their need to win becomes their downfall. Your silence doesn't just protect you, it turns the spotlight back on them. And most people can't handle that kind of exposure. They need you to react. Because without your reaction, they're left standing in their own emotional mess. And you walk through it untouched. Nietzsche's warning to the weak. Nietzsche once said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." That's not just a line about discipline, it's a warning. If you can't master your emotions, someone else will use them against you. So your task is simple, but not easy. Train yourself to pause, to breathe, to detach before deciding. Not because you don't feel, but because your feelings don't control you. That is the mark of the Übermensch. Not a man above others, but a man above his impulses. Conclusion. The calm that commands the room. When you can remain calm under attack, poised under pressure, and silent in chaos, you become untouchable. And in a world full of emotionally reactive people, the one who stays still stands out, not because they're louder, but because they're anchored. Presence without words. How to command a room silently. You walk into a room. You don't announce yourself. You don't try to impress. You don't even speak. But something shifts. The energy tightens. Conversations slow. People take notice, not because of anything you did, but because of what you didn't do. This is the silent art of presence, and it's one of the rarest, most underestimated forces in the world. In Nietzsche's vision of the powerful individual, the Übermensch doesn't need to chase attention. He becomes a gravitational force, not by asserting himself, but by embodying something deeper, self-possession. Let's break down how it works, and how you can harness it. What is presence really? Presence is not about being flashy. It's not about being physically intimidating or wearing something expensive. It's not even about confidence, at least not the loud kind. Presence is density, a certain stillness, a calm pressure, an awareness that radiates without effort. It comes from being deeply rooted in yourself, from knowing who you are, from not needing external validation in any form. You don't walk into a room trying to control people. You walk in having already controlled yourself, and that, paradoxically, changes how everyone else responds to you. The science of subtle power. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as nonverbal dominance. It's a set of signals, posture, eye contact, stillness, energy, that communicate power without aggression. Humans evolved to pick up on these cues instantly. Before we even speak, our brains are evaluating. Is this person above or below me in the social hierarchy? Someone who's fully present, not distracted, not nervous, not performing, triggers a biological respect response. It's primal. It bypasses logic. We feel their authority before they say anything. How to build true presence. So how do you cultivate this kind of presence? It begins internally, not externally. Still your mind. An overactive inner voice leaks into your posture, your eyes, your pacing. Stillness inside creates stillness outside. Move with intention. Avoid unnecessary gestures. Let each movement mean something. Precision signals power. Master your breath. Slow, steady breathing grounds you, and others will subconsciously match your rhythm. Make space. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. Occupy your space unapologetically, without overcompensating. Listen deeply. When someone speaks, give them your full attention. It's disarming, and it makes your silence heavier, more valuable. Look without need. Your gaze should say, I see you, but I don't need anything from you. That unsettles people, in a good way. You are the frame, not the painting. Most people try to be the painting. Loud colors, dramatic brushstrokes, obvious beauty. But those with real presence? They're the frame. They don't compete for attention. They define the context. Their stillness makes other people's noise seem chaotic. Their calm exposes other people's anxiety. Nietzsche knew this well. He believed that the most powerful truths are quiet, and the most powerful people don't seek attention. They redefine what matters. That's what presence does. It turns the spotlight toward you, even if you never step on stage. What happens when you stop needing approval? The key ingredient in presence is this: you're not trying to prove anything. Most people are constantly performing, trying to be liked, understood, admired. And the more they try, the more they leak insecurity. But when you drop the need to be seen, you become magnetic. People start watching you without knowing why. They feel something rare, a person who's not pulled by the crowd, who's not fidgeting for attention, who's already whole. That's presence. It's not something you do. It's something you are, once you stop performing. Nietzsche's silent power. Nietzsche wrote of the kind of man who walks above the herd, not in arrogance, but in clarity. A person who carries meaning in his gaze, who speaks in silences, who radiates something that cannot be faked, authentic selfhood. He doesn't chase power, he becomes it. You don't get there by playing louder, you get there by playing deeper. Conclusion: let the room adjust to you. When you walk into a space, don't adjust to the room, let the room adjust to you. You don't do this through dominance or manipulation. You do it through mastery. Mastery of your mind, your body, your emotions, your silence. Because presence isn't something you broadcast. It's something that unfolds quietly, completely, and on your terms. Strategic silence, how to influence without speaking. Silence isn't the absence of communication. It's a weapon. Used carelessly, it creates confusion. Used intentionally, it creates leverage. In the age of noise, social media rants, constant hot takes, and instant replies, silence is disruption. It breaks the rhythm. It disturbs the game. It forces the other person to react to you. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that truth is not always something to shout. Sometimes it's something to withhold. And when you learn to wield silence with precision, you stop playing the game on their terms. You begin to control the tempo. Not all silence is equal. There's weak silence. Silence that stems from fear, from insecurity, from not knowing what to say. That silence is submissive. And then there's strategic silence, the kind that leaves people guessing, the kind that makes your words feel rare and your thoughts feel valuable, the kind that shifts conversations in your direction without you ever needing to raise your voice. When you learn to master this kind of silence, you learn to guide the narrative by letting others fill in the blanks. Psychology. The silence gap. Cognitive scientists have studied the power of pauses and gaps in speech. One key finding: humans are uncomfortable with incomplete patterns. We crave closure. When you pause before responding, people anticipate. When you don't respond at all, people project. They read into your expression. They start over-explaining. They imagine your disapproval or your approval because you've left a gap, and that gap becomes fertile ground for influence. You didn't push. You let them move toward you. That's power. When silence becomes presence, silence can be louder than speech when it's anchored. The more disciplined you are with your words, the more weight they carry. The less you speak, the more people want to listen when you finally do. It's not about being mysterious for the sake of ego. It's about building an economy of words. Your silence increases your value because it signals you're not trying to be accepted, liked, or validated. You're observing, you're choosing, you're deciding what deserves a response and what doesn't. That selectiveness, it creates mystique, and mystique creates influence. How to use strategic silence. Here are 5 subtle ways to apply it. Pause before responding. A 2-second silence shows you think before speaking, a sign of authority and confidence. Don't fill every gap. Let moments of silence breathe. Resist the urge to ease tension. Let others squirm. They'll reveal more. Don't rush to answer questions, especially challenging ones. Reflect. Make them wait. Silence builds perceived depth. Use silence to end conversations. Sometimes not responding is the loudest no you can give. Withdraw after key moments. Say something powerful, then leave. Silence afterwards amplifies impact. Nietzsche and the power of the unspoken. Nietzsche often left his readers in silence. His writing was filled with aphorisms, short, powerful statements followed by space. The reader was forced to pause, to reflect, to fill in the rest. Why? Because true impact doesn't come from explaining everything. It comes from awakening something inside the listener. And that often happens in the space after the words. That's what strategic silence does. It gives your presence room to echo. Conclusion: don't just withhold words. Withhold access. The most powerful silence isn't just what you don't say. It's what you don't reveal. It's what you don't make available. In a world desperate for reaction, your restraint becomes dominance. Because silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means you're in control, and they're not. Strategic invisibility, the power of disappearing at the right time. In a world where everyone is trying to be seen, the smartest move is sometimes to disappear. Not forever, not in weakness, but intentionally, purposefully, to create space, to build mystery, to reset the balance of power. We live in a culture of overexposure. Everyone shares, everyone posts, everyone performs. People fear invisibility because they think it means irrelevance. But Nietzsche would argue the opposite. What is always visible becomes common. What is rare becomes valuable. And when you learn to disappear with precision, to make your absence speak louder than your presence, you enter a new class of power. Disappearance creates demand. Psychologically, humans are wired to desire what they can't fully access. It's called scarcity bias. The less available something is, the more we value it. Not because it's necessarily better, but because it's elusive. When you're always around, always speaking, always showing up, people get used to you. Your impact dilutes. But when you remove yourself from a conversation, a dynamic, a social space, you become a question mark. And that question is sticky. Where is he? Why did she pull back? What is he thinking? Your absence becomes more memorable than someone else's presence. The tactical retreat. Disappearing isn't avoidance. It's a move. It's a reset button you control, one that instantly shifts power in your favor. When you step back from the game, you remove yourself from reaction, from competition, from distraction. This creates space for recalibration. You observe from a distance. You re-enter only when it matters. Strategic invisibility sends a message. I'm not dependent on your attention. I don't need the spotlight. I move when I decide to, not when I'm called. That's real control, and people feel it, even when you're not there. Examples of strategic disappearance. The silent exit. Leave a conversation or event without announcing it. Let your absence be noticed, not your departure. The delayed response. Don't reply immediately. Let time increase your value. People will think more carefully when they know you don't answer on impulse. The missing voice. When others debate, argue, or overexpress, say nothing. Your silence becomes weightier than their noise. The sudden retreat. Pull back just when your presence peaks. People will feel the drop and crave your return. The selective return. Don't come back often, but when you do, make it count. One appearance at the right time is worth more than constant presence. Nietzsche and the shadow power. Nietzsche understood the paradox of visibility. He wasn't interested in constant performance. He believed in becoming so self-contained, so rooted in your own values, that the world follows you, even when you vanish. He once wrote, "One must learn to be the one who disappears." Why? Because the world chases what runs away. It dismisses what clings too closely. To become influential, you must become unavailable by design. Not out of pride, but out of principle. Not to punish, but to preserve your aura. That's the power of the shadow. You're not seen often, but you're felt always. What invisibility reveals. When you step back, you learn who really values you. You see who notices, who asks, who reaches out, and who doesn't. Your absence reveals what your presence could not. It filters your environment. It purifies your circle. It recalibrates your role. It also resets your internal center. When you're always on, always visible, you begin to perform. You dilute, you compromise. But when you vanish, and then return fully grounded, you come back with force. Not louder, but heavier. Conclusion. Absence is a form of communication. Silence says something. So does absence. The world tells you to always be present, always be available, always be active. But power often lies in withholding your time, your energy, your visibility, because the most unforgettable presence is the one that is felt even when it's not there. The will to power. How to own yourself. Completely. You've learned the art of silence, the discipline of observation, the strength of emotional control, the magnetism of presence, the leverage of invisibility. But all of it, every technique, every insight, points to something deeper, a state of being, a state where you no longer need to control others, because you've mastered yourself. This Nietzsche called the will to power, and it's not what most people think. What Nietzsche really meant by power, Nietzsche's will to power, isn't about dominance, manipulation, or conquest. It's not about standing above others. It's about overcoming yourself, your fear, your doubt, your impulse to prove, your craving for validation. To Nietzsche, power wasn't external. It wasn't something you earned from society. It was something you discovered within and then expressed through your very existence. When you operate from this inner source, you don't chase approval. You don't beg for attention. You don't react to every challenge. You radiate direction, even in silence. The true master needs nothing. Look around. The loudest people are often the most insecure. Those who rush to speak, to dominate, to be seen. They're not powerful. They're hungry. True strength moves differently. It walks into a room and changes the atmosphere. It watches without blinking. It speaks slowly, rarely, and with impact. It disappears and still lingers in people's minds. The person who lives by the will to power doesn't dominate others. They don't need to. They've already won by needing nothing from the world, becoming the unshakable presence. To embody this philosophy, you must become complete within yourself. That doesn't mean isolation. It means independence. You choose when to speak, when to vanish, when to act, not because of pressure, but because of clarity. Your silence is no longer defense, it's direction. Your calm isn't detachment, it's depth. Your presence isn't performance, it's truth. When others live in reaction, you live in intention. The final shift, from tactics to identity. Up until now, you've learned techniques, how to observe, how to remain still, how to withhold. But these are only powerful when they stop being tactics and start becoming who you are. You don't use silence. You are the silence that speaks volumes. You don't choose presence. You embody presence. You don't perform power. You become power. This shift is subtle but life-changing. Because when you live from the inside out, everything external begins to orbit around your stillness. Nietzsche's final gift, the higher self. Nietzsche didn't believe in fitting in. He believed in rising above, not to escape the world, but to create your own. He spoke of the Übermensch, the higher individual, not as someone superior to others, but someone superior to his former self. You don't get there through applause. You get there through evolution, through silence, through solitude, through discipline, through the slow burning of your lesser impulses, until all that remains is something unshakable, something real. The world will feel you, even in your absence. When you live like this, people sense it. They can't explain it, but they feel it. The way you look at them, the way you speak or don't, the way you hold space, the way you vanish and still remain present in their thoughts. You've stopped playing the game, and now they start adjusting to you because you are no longer trying to win. You are becoming the kind of person no one can compete with because you're not even in the same arena. Conclusion. The power that cannot be taken. The ultimate form of power isn't controlling others. It's when nothing can control you. Not fear, not ego, not insecurity, not the need to be seen, not the pressure to conform. You speak when it matters, you vanish when it's time. You move through the world with intention, not impulse. That is the will to power, not dominance over the world, but complete ownership of your own existence. And from that place, you don't need to outsmart anyone. You've already transcended them without saying a word.